Hello, everybody, and welcome to Economics Monday on the IBM TV network, now broadcasting on the Pod TV network. I'm your host, Nick Palavita, along with Sasha Spar, and we also could bring in Peter Bennett. We have everybody, not everybody here today, because more people are going to be joining on Economics Monday. And first of all, since Sasha mentioned politics, I just want to finish up that conversation, politics and chess, which I find to be pretty interesting. What did you find that was so interesting about politics and chess? I mean, what's going on there in that world?
Well, in our politicized world, actually nothing can exist or survive without some kind of politics, including chess, which is actually, I was thinking about the concept. I thought, okay, it's an individual game played between two people who are not even talking to each other during the game, like even in bridge or even in tennis or any other game, people talk to each other. In chess, people don't talk. So what kind of politics could be in chess if people don't talk to each other? They play a game which consists of a highly intelligent content and no interaction between the players. But then I started to think and I started to evaluate different things what happened in chess, from Olympiads to World Championship to many other subjects. And I found that politics, in fact, was involved. And that all started with 1948. The World Championship, which Russians first won for the first time ever, and the Russian Federation, which was, of course, emboldened by victory in Second World War, and they started to slowly get all FIDE, which was completely helpless organization before 1948, because besides organizing this chess Olympiad, which nobody really followed for what they are, everybody would follow World Championship. And FIDE was not involved in any manner in organizing any matches, whether it's a Capablanca Alokin, whether it's a Alokin anywhere, and up to 1948. And that's where the Russians, they got it under control, all FIDE, and they're winning or put their representatives in all election simply by bribing all the candidates from all the South African, Latin American, and other countries. And that goes on now for so long. And unfortunately, perhaps the brightest star in chess of all time, Robert Fischer, he fell as a victim of Russian politics. They were completely against playing unlimited match with a world champion, with the score would be, say, 5-5, and they would still play for whoever will win sixth game. No, they were against it. However, in 1978, 3 years later, when Korchnoi played Karpov, they adopted that and they played until 6 victories. So, no, I'm not going to make it a chess and politics show now on our program, but I just wanted to make comments. But it's subject well worth exploring, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it's a subject we're going to explore today. It won't be chess and politics. It's this issue. It's cybersecurity issues, okay, which affects the economy. And here's the question we have, Peter. The Colonial Pipeline was shut down because of ransomware, which, from what I understand, they paid $5 million to restore this. Maybe peanuts, unless you're writing the check, then it's big money. Okay,
yeah, we're not really sure how much they paid, but they did pay.
They did pay. So the real question, we're going to have David Walker on later on this program. America 2040 still a superpower, or is cybersecurity our next pandemic that could actually hurt the American economy? I don't know what your thoughts are on this one, Peter.
Well, first, I want to go back to the chess. Just one quick point. It's interesting because, to me, chess really develops your mind, and it gets you thinking many steps ahead. And I was looking at, the differences between Russia and the United States when we were discussing a few weeks ago, Russia and the U.S., again, the same topic of where we'll be in 2040. But first of all, much larger percentage. I think it's like 20-25%. I forgot now. The Russians play chess, and maybe 8% in the U.S. But the interesting thing is, chess players I came across this, that chess players are much more likely to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, to economics, forgot magazine, to different like really science magazines. So they're a pretty intelligent group. So I think it's interesting because sometimes you wonder about the U.S., let's say, population's knowledge and strategic thinking. Let's leave it at that. So onto the colonial pipeline. It's I guess first of all, the Biden administration, I heard, probably, we don't know this, pressured them to pay. But these are difficult situations. The interesting thing is they had the ability, though, to manually run the pipelines, but they needed permission from the administration, because it's a perfect example of government sticking their nose in, and government has said you can't manually do it. You have to use computers. It's like, why are they getting involved in the first place? But anyway, so they had a lot of adjustments. In the end, they paid, and I assume they, so it all worked out. But it just also shows the importance of pipelines. And now it's putting political pressure on Biden, interestingly, because you say, well, you just shut down Keystone, maybe we need these pipelines for a while.
Yeah.
Peter, interesting question I have. Do you think this people who accepted ransom $5 million, two questions actually, why wouldn't they go for $5.5 million? Number one. Number two, are they accepting Bitcoin payments?
Well, actually, I think it was paid in Bitcoin. I'm not sure. I believe it was paid in cryptocurrency.
I think it was paid in cryptocurrency too. That's what I understand.
Yeah, that's what I heard. And $5 million is a nice round number. It's not a huge amount to these companies, and these dark side people are going to just go and they'll just do the next one. And I assume they opened it up, they freed it up, so now they can go on to the next company. It's not a bad week's pay for those people, right?
Exactly. This is very smart of them to keep the figure within $5 million, because if you go for $100 million, the people will have difficulties to pay or so on.
Oh, yeah.
$5 million, almost any business can pay. So if they will go for 100 businesses at $5 million each, I think they'll do very well for themselves.
Yeah, and if you think about it, on $5 million is a cost of a contract to get a good security firm involved in what you're doing. So in terms of a cost of doing business, it's actually pretty small. But what got me about this whole thing, Sasha, is that like on a lot of our shows, they say, well, the solution to the internet being invaded is to do an intranet. In other words, keep your internet off the internet and just work with your own company. And this was an intranet deal. But the real problem, at least this is the way I understand, I was trying to get some subject matter experts on the show, but here's the way I understand it. What they did is they would send the ransomware to a random employee who, on an email, who would then say, this is an update, please update your files. Okay,
oh, no.
Oh yeah, this is really good, Peter. Okay, this is your Microsoft update, please update your files. They would press the button on the intranet to update the file. And then what happened was, rather than updating the file, the ransomware gets in there and disrupts the computer system. And then they have the key to shut it down, but no one else does. So then what they do is they send another one, your computer systems are all down. We've taken control. Please send us $5 million, then we'll give you the key. Now, what I don't know is how they actually were able to get the key over. Now, here's what has happened in the past. There's a book I have that deals with Malaysia, and when they had a really corrupt issue, they went to a law firm, a major New York law firm. Okay, that I'm not going to mention because they'd probably sue me. And what they did is they actually held it in escrow in a major New York law firm. Seriously. Yeah. And this was a multi-billion-dollar heist. Okay, so it's quite possible, because what they did is they ran this Ponzi scheme through a trust account in a major New York law firm. So they might have, because I was trying to figure out, how do you turn the key over, transport the money over without both parties saying, well, I got the key, forget your ransomware, or I got your money, forget your key. They may have gone to a law firm, a reputable law firm, who actually brokered that transaction and was able to transport the money and the key, just like you would do if you do a real estate closing. The lawyer holds the funds in escrow, and then they turn the title over and they turn the real estate over. I wasn't really sure. The details on this isn't well known. Maybe Shaquille, since he is from a foreign country, can fill us in on how this ransomware works. Oh, there he is. There's Shaquille. How do you do this?
I can't deal with this. This is not cool. Here I am trying to be conservative and just wearing a black shirt. But look at what Sasha's got on. I'm not having this.
Yeah.
No. I'll be back. No, I can't appear like this. This is not. I can't have Sasha show me up.
It's a summertime now.
He really went to change.
Yeah, he's going to dress down, which, by the way, you can do quite easily.
That's a really interesting point, Nick. It's really interesting. I didn't realize it was an intranet thing. So then that raises several points. But one, you would think that then companies will say, we need, and you would have thought they would have already done this, but it should be coming, you would think. They say, okay, we're going to tighten our intranet security. For instance, what if a company just said, we are not allowing any employees to download anything? We're going to control what gets downloaded. If you want to download something, send it to the computer department, and then you'd think they could, with an easy fix, when they get used to this, protect the intranet. You would think.
Well, that's the reason this is on Economics Monday, Peter, because remember some of the big problems we faced in the United States was this pandemic that no one saw coming except Bill Gates. And Bill Gates was going, hey, the biggest problem is going to be a pandemic because of international travel, all this other stuff, yada, yada. Well, economically, one of the biggest problems and threats to the U.S. economy could be cybersecurity. Somebody just came off their trip to Hawaii, I guess, or
no. This is one of my day shirts. I've got roses all through it. So
okay, well, I guess if all you're doing is trading stocks, you can dress however you like for a living. See, the thing is, economically, is the next big pandemic cybersecurity threats in the United States, because when they busted through an intranet like Colonial Pipeline, that means all the Russian friends of Sasha, and he has plenty of them, I've seen them on his TV shows, can bust through almost any corporation's security. And by the way, financial services, according to IBM, is the number one place they go after.
I smell a bit of a rat with this whole thing. You guys.
I mean, can I bust into Shaquille's billion-dollar portfolio and say, look, you can't do any trading anymore unless you pay me a ransomware?
You've got no chance, and if you do, it won't be my problem anyway, because my prime banks, which are American, actually, a lot of them, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and the few Europeans, they're on the hook for it. That's not actually my responsibility. But and even if they couldn't handle it, it'd be fine because your government would bail them out. That's fine. But no, let's get back to this issue here. So some foreign power, if I'm understanding this correctly, has hacked into your pipelines and have shut down fuel supplies all across the eastern seaboard.
Yeah, foreign power. It came from Russia, a corporation called DarkSide.
I'm calling bull dust on this. This sounds like something the Democrats wanted as their policy, doesn't it?
No, it has nothing to do with politics. It's business.
Weren't you guys going for that? Let's have no fuel, no fossil fuels, shut down pipelines. Nobody has the Tesla guys. They're not having to line up, to
get. Tesla's okay. That's the reason their stock is trading at 1,000 times.
I'm not sure, especially after seeing the CIA ad that I've seen since I've been away. I'm not actually sure that this was foreign interference. I think this could actually be a domestic policy of yours. I think this could be your own government doing this.
I think Shaquille is kidding.
I think Shaquille is.
It's not.
Peter, you guys have had for decades people saying that NASA faked the moon landings. Are you trying to tell me that they haven't faked the fuel shortage? Come on.
No. Well, there's going to be fuel shortages, probably, and price of oil is probably going.
There isn't any in Australia.
Can I finish? Okay. So the price of oil is going up. Look, I said it just a few minutes ago that this is going to put pressure on Biden because he closed the Keystone pipeline. And a lot of people are saying, wait, we really need pipelines. Of course we need pipelines. The environmentalists are so confused in a way, but I understand the counter argument. But they're confused because they say, oh, shut down a pipeline. But then the fuel gets trucked anyway by truck, and it's so inefficient pollution-wise. And natural gas particularly, why would you stop, natural gas pipelines especially? But they're thinking, for what it's worth, and it's not really totally right, is if they raise the prices on fossil fuels by limiting it and things like that, that encourages people to switch. And there's a certain economic argument there, but it's really not the way to do it. What they actually should do, by the way, I'll throw in, is just throw a tax in on oil, and then supply and demand curves. So then you're moving to a different place on the demand, the demand supply. When they cross basic economics, and instead of the Saudis getting the extra money of the Russians, then people start saying, okay, we're going to pay even more taxes. They already tax it a lot, by the way.
Yeah, but
clearly, yes, you're right. I was joking, of course. Of course, I was joking.
But see, my problem is this is the start of a wave.
The issue is what you've just said. The issue, what you've just said, is you shut a pipeline. The fuel, the oil still needs to be distributed, so they truck it, and that is not just economically more expensive, but environmentally it's more expensive. But it's been made perfectly clear by the political class in your country that they don't care. They don't care whether what they say and what they do matches. And that's not a Democrat thing or a Republican thing. It's both parties. Nobody cares whether or not we sit here and say, oh, well, we'd love to have better healthcare outcomes. Are the Democrats really trying to get better healthcare outcomes? Are the Republicans really trying to? No. They're both doing the same thing. Whatever is going to look good to the most extreme of our party voters is what we're going to do. And everybody else can just split the better of the two evils, the lesser of the two evils. That's what's been happening. It doesn't just happen in your country, by the way. I know you guys feel like you're unique. It doesn't just happen in your country. It happens across the EU. That's why Brexit happened. It happens in Australia. It happens in New Zealand. It happens all over the Western world. It happens in Canada. It happens all over the Western world. It's just a little bit more pronounced in America. That's all. Like, for most of our countries, we try to cover up and hide from the international community our ridiculousness. You guys are quite proud of it. You make movies about it. You put it on your media, so the rest of us outside of North America get to see it, and we go, "Oh my goodness, what's going on?" And we look at our own countries. So the reality is, I don't think it's really a matter of what works and what's going to bring out the best outcomes. It's about whoever thinks they're going to get a political advantage. That's the real issue.
It's a big factor. It's a big factor.
Yeah, hey, Peter, can you?
America is supposed to be the greatest, richest country that ever existed, ever lived, the most amount of freedom, and all the other nonsense that you guys believe about yourselves. There is not a fuel shortage that I'm aware of anywhere else in the world, except for the United States. And if you're trying to tell me that a country that's put people on the moon is sending, spaceships to Mars, you've got all these billionaires living there, you're the greatest, best country, the big bastion of freedom, have been infiltrated by a couple of hackers that was probably taught by Sasha over there at a couple of chess games? I don't believe it. Because if that's the case, who the hell is my country, Australia, or my other country, the UK, allied with?
Yeah, Peter, he does have a point. So could you send Sasha, our friend from Canada, and send Shaquille, our friend from Australia, a memo that we are the world's largest economy, just to remind them?
We are for now.
We are for now, right? So the thing is, just to remind the Australians and Canadians that we are the world's largest economy.
Yeah, look.
Even after $5 million, you're still
$5 million, we're still the world's largest economy.
I'm going to move to Russia. They've got gorgeous girls. There's a shortage of men over there. I'm moving there. got
Yeah,
hacked by.
you should. You should be delighted to come over here.
Look,
But the
maybe
real
this
problem is
go ahead.
the real problem is cybersecurity. Are we seeing the beginning of a wave of? That's your dog race win, okay? But can your dog win in the United States, Shaquille?
Well,
That's
I
the
can
real
tell
question.
you that if I go to Russia and I explain to them that my only female dog that I actually have that's racing won the latest bracelet, and I presented that. I'll just try and bring it up so the camera.
So how
can
much
actually
money
see it.
did you win when your dog won? How much did your team win?
Well, I don't know. I don't care about the money. It's about the glory.
Well, money is
You
the
know
glory.
what happens
It's
in
like show
Russia?
dogs, I guess. When
if
you
Shaquille
have
will
a
show
show
up,
dog, it's not about the money. It's about the prize. Just like horses.
It was
glory.
it was 25,000. The trophy, the ladies bracelet. Now, Sasha, where would I be best off if I showed up in Russia and told a lovely Russian lass or a Ukrainian lass, where you're from, that I was going to name a dog after her, and if the dog won, she gets a lady's bracelet, and I'll keep the trophy. And there's a bottle of champagne to go with it, by the way. If I said that in Russia or in the Ukraine, would I be better off saying it there, or would I be better off saying it in the United States, where I can ask a girl out for a date and she can't actually get to the date because she can't put fuel in her car?
Well, there's a big difference of treatment that you and your dog will get in Russia or in Ukraine. In Ukraine, you have some chances. In Russia, the first thing what they will do, they will separate you from your dog. And that will be the number one what they will do in any case. In Ukraine, you will at least, you will get some mileage out of your credentials and your dog ownership and so on. So you probably might as well go to Ukraine. Try your luck there first.
Yeah, you're better off in the Ukraine. But aren't we going to have a real problem?
I think I know I shouldn't say this. The censors are going to be all over me, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that probably the next time we're in a relationship, and male dogs are called dogs and female dogs are called bitches, and I think the next time we're in a relationship that I'm not happy with, I should move to the Ukraine so I can be separated from my. I'll just mute myself now.
Okay, so let's get back to cybersecurity.
Let's get back to cybersecurity as a threat to corporations, Peter. And this is the problem I'm seeing coming forward, because they paid the ransom, and now you have all these Russians over there that are unemployed because of the coronavirus that didn't exist in Sputnik, that may or may not have worked. And the thing is, they're seeing opportunities in cybercrime. And so are we going to see an explosion of cybercrime that can hurt the American economy?
George,
Yes.
do not negotiate with terrorists. You do not pay the ransoms.
But
George,
they did.
Well, you know what? First of all, there was
cat's
a
out of
lot
the
of
bag.
political pressure to pay the ransom, probably from the Biden administration. But look, for $5 million, but I think it's going to evolve, because basically, like you said, Nick, if they're getting through the intranet, and then
got through the internet.
it should, and that was really interesting. I didn't know that, but
yeah, that's the thing that really got me.
But that means there has to be lots of ways to stop that in the future if these companies wise up. So, the next side, soon you would think the U.S. government and other agencies would coordinate this to say, okay, stop letting your employees download things, even if it's important. You have to have go through a central your central computer department, your IT people, and just don't let anybody in. No downloads anymore.
Does this sound a bit sus to you? Like 5 million. Like, look, I'm not criminally minded. I don't think. I don't know. But let's just pretend that you and I are criminals and we're going to hijack the fuel supply of the entire Eastern Seaboard. Would you give that up for 5 million?
Sure.
You got control. 5 million. You'd want more than that, wouldn't you? Sure.
Yeah, because it's a week's work for a few people. If you ask for too much, maybe you don't get it. But 5 million, they probably figured out easy, and then they go on to the next one.
What about 20?
How many of those do you need before you've got a good pension plan? You've got a retirement. 5 million a week for a few people. It's a good number, because, as Sasha said, it's something where they say, okay, it's a lot of money, but to us it's nothing, so we'll pay it and, move on. And then these dark side people can just move on to the next one until, all the countries around the world, I hope hoping the U.S. will wise up first, but then they all have to protect their internet, and it has to be technically very feasible.
Actually, Peter, the more I think about it, why wouldn't they say, okay, here's $5 million you're paying, and you'll be all right, and everything will function normally. However, we'll give you an option. For another $5 million, you will be immune completely, 100% for the next 3 months for anything similar to happen.
Yeah, they could, but you know what? They could take, the company's not going to fall for this again. Now that I know that Nick's point about the internet, that's key, because
it is a key.
you
And
just tell your employees there's no more downloading anything anymore.
Yeah, we just bring in
the
the
IT department.
No, but can I introduce our next guest?
yes, please introduce our guest.
Because we haven't seen for a while, David M. Walker, the former comptroller general of the United States, has written this book. David, I have been in previous shows actually quite obnoxious and hard on you, because I just figured you're a politician like all the rest of them.
Oh, no.
I have now actually read your book, and it's really rare for me to give a completely shameless plug. For anybody watching, I think you need to read this book, because when it comes to being impartial, when it comes to being able to recognize the points made by both sides of politics, something that I thought that I was, and then I see somebody who's more impartial than me and actually had a proper job, unlike me. I've read this book, and seriously, this is something that you need to read. If you're at home watching the show, buy this book. You need to read it. It's people like David that's going to save the future of Western civilization. And I'm not just trying to say that to be funny. I actually really mean that. It's people like David that is going to be that difference and bring two very divided sides back together and make them realize that they're fighting for the same cause. So, David, I have actually finished your book now. That's great reading. And it's very relevant outside the
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind remarks. Thanks for reading the book. And the last thing that I want to be is a politician. It is not a merit-based nor integrity-based endeavor. I learned the hard way in Connecticut. Yeah.
Well, David, they say I'm a libertarian, and you were in government, so that just instant I don't like you. You're in government. So, but you've redeemed yourself. It took you 400 pages, but you redeemed yourself. I'm good with you now.
You know, Shaquille
You must have got an extended version, because it was only about 280 pages. I don't know.
Maybe I read it 2 times.
Shaquille brings up an interesting.
Pages. Yes, you're right.
Shaquille brings up an interesting point, which is the division, and and I bet it's a great book. I mean, it is, but America is so divided now because the press is. I blame the press almost solely, because first of all, I mean, I don't like the left press and I don't like the right press. First of all, and I'm not either. I lean a bit right, but it depends on the issue. I'm left on a lot, just as a disclaimer. But the thing is, I look at both, and the left press, first of all, most of them have no ethics at all. I mean, and interestingly, by the way, internationally, a lot of people rely on CNN and think that's the news. But CNN is so far left; they're 99% left. And what these leftists do, and the right, and again, the right press. Let me finish. The right press is slanted. So, but what I looked at over and over again. The left press, and what happens is they totally refuse to report on anything that doesn't follow their narrative. So often, I mean, major stories, and they won't mention it, or they'll bury it in one word, or they'll even cut quotes up to mislead the public, and it's so bad. And if I watch right, I disagree a lot, like Fox News or something like that. It's like, that's wrong, but that's mostly right and mostly ethical reporting. But when you watch a lot of the left press, you go, this is totally slanted and totally biased, and you have no idea of the truth. And it's dividing the country, because I have friends who only will look at the left press, and I have people who look at only the right press, by the way, and some look at both. And the last point I'll make there, and I'll throw it out there, but I've had one or two friends who I convinced to look at the right press for a while, and all of a sudden they totally changed their realities, because these people, I mean, Walter Cronkite and anybody 20 years ago would croak. They would die if they looked at the ethical standards now.
Well, there aren't any ethical standards. And Peter,
I have to disappear for a couple of minutes. But if I can just quickly say,
sure.
Nick on the previous show that we're on, World Edition, made comment that a particular world leader had realized that all the media were in one building and blew the building up.
Right.
And I'm just wondering what the problem is.
Well,
I don't know what he's talking about.
We'll see you later, Shaquille. He's been removed permanently. But,
Peter, may I ask you one question, please? Have you heard about critical race theory, and what do you think about that?
I mean, again, you know what? I mean, America needs to make improvements. There's no doubt about it. But, you know, then there's extremism, and there's trying to erase the whole past. It's the glass is half full of glass empty, but those who would look at America as having all these problems and no positive is like the glass is, you know, they're looking at it as 100% empty when really it's 10% empty. You know, America is evolving. There's things that should be improved, but you know, there's people who profit from this in so many different ways. So, you know, I mean, I'll bring up defund the police, and then, of course, Dave. I just read today that, you know, there's a huge spike in crime in New York, and you know, they're like, oh, let's defund the police. It's like, where do you get these ideas? Let's defund the police. You know, yes, maybe you say you shouldn't do chokeholds. You know, you reform it. As a matter of fact, the Republicans had a proposal in Congress, which the Democrats wouldn't pass because they probably didn't want to solve the problem because it was a good political issue for them. But yeah, you need to make changes. But so a poll today, I said 60% of New Yorkers now want to increase funding for the police. It's like, yeah, because murders are going up, crime is going up. Of course, it's not going to work.
David?
Well, I'll give you my comments based on what I understand that it is, but let me preface it by saying my family came to America in the 1680s, and both I and my wife have ancestors who fought and died in the American Revolution. And this country is by no means perfect, and it never will be perfect, but it's constantly striving for improvement. And when there are racists in our country, but a vast majority of this country are not racist. We're the most diverse country on earth. We're the most inclusive country on earth. And I think one of the ridiculous things that's going on now is, you know, trying to basically rewrite history by indicting some of our greatest leaders because, you know, in their time, they did things that were not illegal, arguably were, you know, immoral, but were such as slavery. I mean, you know, when people start talking about taking Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe's names off of things, and even some knuckleheads, Lincoln, because Lincoln wasn't sympathetic enough, all right, I think it's outrageous. And so I think that, you know, I think we need to educate people based upon the facts, not based upon opinion. And I come back also with the media. We don't have news anymore. We have opinion, okay? And I encourage my midshipmen to get their information from multiple sources, recognizing that most of the sources are slanted. And you would hope that you would get the facts and then the opinion. But nowadays, you're getting more the opinion and little to no of the facts, which is really challenging. And it is dividing the country. There's absolutely no question about it.
Yeah. And you know, with that, my family actually came in 1665. They settled here, the Vandermarks. And my cousin was the Attorney General of the United States. My second cousin, Bill Saxby, he probably was before your time, David, when you were in Washington, but he was the Attorney General.
I'm not that old.
I know that. That's what I'm saying. It's before your time. Bill was actually the Attorney General.
Well, I thought you meant the 1635.
No, I'm saying William Saxby. He was the Attorney General.
I know who he is. I know who he
Oh,
is.
you do know who he is? Right. Well, he's my second cousin, believe it or not. The Saxbys and the Vandermarks, which is my grandmother, were cousins. His great-grandfather and my great-grandmother were brothers and sisters. It's kind of interesting. But the thing is, here's the problem when you talk about media and how slanted it is. In North Carolina, they said, you cannot teach race anymore. There's a bill going through the House of Representatives that says you can't teach race anymore in school. So what I did, which I usually do whenever I do law, I go pull the bill, and here it is. It's House Bill. Actually, it's House Bill, I think it is 324. It's only 2 pages. I read through the whole 2 pages. It says nothing like that, Dave. Nothing at all.
Well, it's false advertising. Look at the big $2 trillion bill that passed. Okay. Yeah. It was supposed to be about COVID relief. Less than 20% of it was about COVID relief.
Right.
Okay.
And you got to read this, what I call the source material. And when I do audits before the Internal Revenue Service, they send you a letter saying, this is the facts, here's the law. And I've done a lot of audits. Every time they cite the law, they miscite it. I mean, every time, 100%. So I go back and read the code and the regs, and I pull out, I said, well, this is what you say it says. This is what it really says it says. And what I find and that's just in an audit, which I guess they expect attorneys to do that type of source work. But what I'm saying in the media, here's the law that actually was passed. The media goes, you can't teach race in school anymore, and there's nothing that says that at all.
I think the problem with, like what you just said there, David, the $2 trillion bill that was supposed to be for COVID, and basically nothing in it, but very little of it has to do with COVID. The same with the infrastructure bill. Right now, we can criticize the Democrats for that, but the Republicans have been no better when they've been in power. And the problem with that is that the everyday person, the everyday American, and the same thing happens around the world, the everyday Australian when it comes to the Liberals and Labor Party, or the Liberals, the Labor and Tories in the UK, etc., etc. The everyday person just shakes their head and just goes, oh, it's just the politicians do what the politicians do. Government is supposed to be an instrument for the people. It's supposed to be something that the people can use to help them to create a better life for themselves. And when people start to mistrust it, or when people start to think that it's just being run by people who have their own interests without any care or consideration for them, it causes a real big problem. AOC made a comment or gave a speech a handful of weeks ago, and she talked about Marxism. Now, I'm clearly against Marxism. I think it's an evil thing. However, she made in that speech a comment about the ecological and human cost of capitalism. I would say that not every capitalist behaves that way, but yes, there have been capitalists who, in the pursuit of profits, have not cared about the wider repercussions. She is correct in what she says in that regard. I would argue that government can't provide those services cheaper on either of those fronts. But the point still remains. And what we have around the Western world is a mixed system. We have generally a capitalist economic system, and we have some socialized services. And that is a system that has worked the best for us for a very long time. But when political people, politicians, their strategists, and just people in general, people who can lobby government, when those people seek to use government power to advantage them and disadvantage others, it's a problem. And I think it's a really big problem when people feel powerless to be able to express how government could better serve them, and feel powerless to be able to affect the changes that they think would be good for them.
Shaquille, you just said something about capitalism, and I want to add something to that, because, Adam Smith was one of the founding thought fathers of capitalism. He's very known for that. And what he said is there are just a very few purposes for government. And one was defense, obviously, and I don't think many people would argue against that. But he talked about the public green. And that was basically, in those days, that was an actual green, where anybody could take advantage of it. Now it's the environment. So, but what he said that is one of government's, important roles, is where there is a public asset like the air, the water, that there, and, I'm not saying be extremist about it, but that's where government does have a role. So I think that's, to say that's not capitalism, or capitalism wouldn't have taken it. Yes, maybe some people took advantage of it. They maybe did too much against the environment, but that is where capitalist government should step in. And that's the point I was going to make. David?
David wants to say, before you do that, if I just quickly make one real quick point. I care about the environment, and everybody that I know who is centre right or even more extreme right, and as everyone knows, I've said on the show before, most of my backers in my financial services pursuits are Christian conservatives. Let me just say, I think that most of the people I deal with care about the environment.
Yeah.
In my opinion, government does a really, really bad job of just about everything they're involved in. And if you really care about the water and the air quality, the last thing that you would do with something so important is to let government run it.
Well, I'm not saying run it. I'm just saying that's where they have to defend it at times. Just like Adam Smith said, when there's a public green that everybody can use, that's where government has to step in with limited regulation to protect the social good.
Absolutely.
We also called it a social good. So what I'm saying is that was part of the founding of capitalism.
Government tries to enact policy willy-nilly. They do a very, very bad job of it.
I'm not a big regulation. I'm not saying government does a good job. I'm just saying it is capitalism.
Policy and regulations lead to exemptions to those policies and regulations, which advantages some companies at the expense of others. David, over to you.
Well, as I say in the book, the three most important words in the U.S. Constitution are the first three: we the people. We the people are responsible and accountable for what does or does not happen. And secondly, we have a republic, which is a representative democracy. It is not a direct democracy. But as I also say in the book, I believe that we've gotten to the point where we have a republic that is not representative of, nor responsive to the general public. Because when you look at the primary system, when you look at the power of the duopoly, the two major parties, when 43% of voters are unaffiliated, when you look at money in politics, when you look at a number of different no term limits, no qualification requirements to hold office other than you're a citizen and you live in a particular place, no qualification requirements. Contrary to what the founders viewed is that people should go into public politics for a temporary period of time for public service from the real world, return to the real world. That's not what we have right now. Government has grown too big. It's promised too much. It needs to restructure. It's doing too much in the way of consumption and things that it shouldn't be involved in. It's not doing enough in the way of investment and social good. And we've had a number of situations where we're privatizing the gains from activity and we're socializing the losses. That is not a sustainable strategy.
David, you made the comment there about the United States being a representative democracy. But I like to focus more on the United States being a constitutional republic. Now, Nick's asked me many times before, why am I so interested in US politics? I think that other than the countries that I'm a citizen of, the UK and Australia, I think that I know a lot more about the US Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, etc. I know a lot more about the US than I do about most other countries. I love Canada, but I actually don't know that much about their political history compared to the United States. And Nick asks me that question all the time. I think the United States is the bastion of freedom. At its most ideal, it is the country that I personally believe I'm a hard Republican as far as monarchies are concerned. I think the United States and what it stands for at its core is something that most countries should strive for. That's why I'm so outspoken when I say things that I think are detrimental to America. That's why I talk so much about, the education system in America when it doesn't teach civics. It doesn't teach, here are the rules and here are the reasons why we have these things. This is a reason why we have the First Amendment or the Second or the Third or the Fourth or, any of the other 27 that you've got. These things are vitally important, and I personally think that the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights are some of history's most important documents.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I say that I'm not an American. Okay. Many Americans said to me when I was in America, or the many times I've been in America, said, "You would be such a great asset to our country. You should become American." And as soon as I told them I liked the place, they didn't want me anymore. So, it's a real problem, this sort of self-hatred that goes on in America, especially amongst the youth, that I haven't actually seen that level of despondency.
Part of the problem is you only know what you know. I consider myself very fortunate because I've had executive positions in all three sectors of the economy. I've traveled to every continent on earth. I've traveled to about 100 different countries, and you don't know how good or bad you have things until you compare it to somebody else. And a lot of the people who complain the most have no contextual sophistication whatsoever. They have no idea how things are elsewhere. Do we have problems? Yes. Do we need to strive for continuous improvement? Yes. But we are the freest country on earth. We are, in the opinion of many, the greatest country on earth. But we have to work together with others in order to address a lot of our common challenges, because many of the challenges that exist in the world today don't respect geopolitical boundaries. The environment.
I think that countries like Australia and the UK and most other Western countries are similarly free. I won't, however, try to defray what you said, because I admire your patriotism. But what I will say is that the ideals of America are so very important, and I hate to see these things get lost. And at the moment, I think that people look at the flaws of capitalism, and young people are being taught, look, here are these flaws in capitalism. So therefore, the only solution is Marxism, rather than how about we just fix the issues with capitalism. Okay, people look at the environment, or like a lot of people have, I think, well-founded complaints about the way that meat is produced or fish is fished out of the sea. I don't like the way that meat is produced in factory farms in the United States. I won't eat it when I'm in the United States. I will pay the extra for organic, or I'll pay the extra for free-range chickens, etc. I'll do that because I'll put my money where my mouth is. That's what I will do. But a lot of people think that the only solution is let's not eat meat at all. And that's the problem, is that people, I think, feel as though they're forced to extremes. And when they're forced to extremes in their everyday life, they're going to feel as though they're forced to extremes in politics, and it shouldn't be that way. And I would say that every politician who has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, every politician should be looking across the aisle. Don't just work with the people that voted for you. Work with the people that didn't vote for you, and try to make sure that you produce the best result. And I think that Thomas Jefferson's last lines in the Declaration of Independence, where he says, "To this we pledge our fortunes, our lives, and our sacred honor." That means something. That's really important. And it might seem like it was a really long time ago, but it was only 200 years ago. That was really important. It was really meaningful. And I think that people should pay attention to those words.
I have a separate point, which, I'm not too negative on this, and I'll tell you why. Everything is cyclical. Socialism thought, socialist thought rises and falls and everything. But, America was in some ways slipping. So it's all an evolution. But by having these extremists with ideas like defund the police and, and these ideas like there's nothing good in American history and we need to erase it, it activates the other side. And that's the cycle. So where people might say, well, religion in the US is slipping away, but now all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to make sure to teach my grandkids, America is a great country, and so are their other grandparents. And so instead, maybe I never would have taught them that. So it's all a cycle where people say, maybe we need a little more religion. Maybe we need to increase funding for the police. Maybe we need to defend the police. So it's all an evolution, and history is an evolution in a sense. So I'm a little optimistic because I think first of all, probably in 22 and 24, American politics will change again, and also, and I think there's a good chance of that, an excellent chance. And I think in the long run, these clashes produce change, and the change in the end is probably good. I would add one thing.
How exactly would defund the police ever result in a positive change?
Oh, well, that's a perfect example. Look at New York today. 60% of people are saying, I want a politician who's going to increase funding for the police. Because by going too extreme on one side, it activates the other side. So now people are going to maybe in a few years, in a lot of these cities even, in Minnesota or Portland, where things are falling apart for years now, because of these, let's defund the police, all of a sudden a lot of people are going to it'll evolve one way or the other. Either people are going to say, no, this is crazy in Portland. This is a perfect example. We're going to either we'll leave and Portland will just fall apart and it'll be part of the evolution of America that nobody
does this not miss
I finished, Shaquille, if you wouldn't run over me. So the point is that either it'll change in Portland, or on the other side, the thought will change, and just like in New York, all of a sudden they're going to elect somebody who's probably very pro-police now, and because people will react to the extreme ideas. And I want to throw one last point in, which is really interesting because it's a life point. People go through a lot of hard times during their life, but that changes people, and it's the same thing as society. So your hard times, in a sense, people are like, the expression is people are like rocks. So they get tumbled in a tumbler and they hit things. It's like, oh, this is a hard experience and this is that, but they learn and they smooth out over time. So I think that there's a good chance society is still doing that as it always has, and it'll smooth out over time, but it is a crazy situation.
Wait a second, I must say something. Okay, I'm sorry, Shaquille. I have to say something, and try to. I was very careful listening to Mr. Walker's comments. Now, all that fine. I agree with everything what you just said. But there is one major difference, and it was amplified very well in the article by Anne Applebaum in the April issue of Atlantis. What she's saying is that she's remembering the French author who, I forgot his name, but I can look up in 2 minutes. He was traveling through the United States in about 1830s. And he was impressed how well democracy is being practiced in U.S. As the town hall meetings where they decided together, maybe they want to build a church, so they all build church together, or they want to do something else, so they all do together. And it was not only a paper democracy, but it was actually how democracy was practiced. And this is why U.S. became a greatest real democracy, not invented, but real democracy, because people discuss and work on things together.
De Tocqueville?
De Tocqueville, Democracy in America.
Now, Now and then she was discussing why he was dissatisfied, why the same never happened in France, because France is a country of great revolution or so on, and the democracy never really worked there. And there is a great difference because French people didn't practice. They wanted to have democracy and they pray for democracy, but they didn't practice democracy. They don't know. They didn't know how really to do it. However, now let's move about century and a half later. In today's America, do we have this really togetherness, town hall meetings, people practicing democracy in today's America? It's a big question. I don't think so.
Of course not. Peter, can I just say, sorry, David.
It depends on where you are in America and what level of government. You don't have it enough at the federal level. You don't have it enough at the state level, with some exceptions. New Hampshire, which is a smaller state, was one of the original 13 states. They have a very large legislature, and they are very well known for having a lot of town hall meetings. But most don't, and that's part of the problem. Because we're so polarized, they don't necessarily want to hear from the people.
Can I just say, Peter, when I originally the question I actually asked you is, how does this stuff, help, further American ideals? I think, or somebody else can rewind the tape and see what the question was I asked you. Look, when it comes to being divisive, defund the police. When you actually sit down and talk to the politicians and the people, Black Lives Matter leaders who actually were after that, what they actually said when you said, well, what are we going to do with no police? How are we going to handle that? What they actually said was, why do we need people with guns and they can use all this force to show up to this kind of thing or that kind of thing, or et cetera, right? They were always, what they were advocating for was, look, if a husband and wife are having a fight, we don't need somebody with a gun to show up. We can have somebody else show up. We can have community service. But that wasn't the message. The message was defund the police, let's have less police, let's have mayhem, was the way that the political right took it. So because the political right took it that way, they focused on the increase in crime. Okay. The political left sat there and went, well, people of color are disproportionately hurt by these things. And so therefore, policing is racist. And there was never any kind of, well, how do we help people who are poor, regardless of the color of their skin, but how do we help people who are poor to be able to enhance the quality of their lives? Those things were lost in the fray. And what we got was divisive politics. And what was so amazing to me, I made jokes about it on the show when I said, are you going to be able to go into India with a Black Lives Matter campaign? Because everybody in India is the same color, like pretty much, right? Like it doesn't work. But yet they had it. They had a Black Lives Matter campaign in India. I'm ethnically Indian. I'm like 10 generations away from there, but I'm ethnically Indian. I'm like, what are you talking about? And what gets lost in that fray is, on the previous show, 3 out of the 4 panelists were people of color. Nick was the exception. On this panel, I'm the only person of color. I don't think it matters. The color of my skin shouldn't actually change whether you agree with me or don't agree with me. But yet we've focused on that instead of focusing on what really is going to affect the changes, what's really going to make a difference. And that's why I always make the comment. It's not that I'm against the Democrats. It's not even that I'm against Kamala Harris. But I struggle to understand how anybody could believe that a poor single mother living in rural Mississippi, or in your home state, Alabama, David, a poor single mother who happens to be black is in any conceivable way helped by some rich black woman from California becoming the VP.
But the unfortunate thing about all
that is the politics of it. That's the optics of it. And that's all that seems to matter to the people that are in charge.
We're at the hour. I'd like to thank the Honorable David M. Walker and the author of the book, American 2040 Still a Superpower. Great book.
You need to buy this book.
You need to buy this book. And we will see you next week
Paid out on
on
the Central
Economics
copy.
Monday. Yes.